Welcome back to the All About Audiology podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lilach Saperstein, and on this show, we bring on guests who share their personal story, as well as experts in different fields, so we can dive into the topics that are affecting you and your life. And we also have lots of professionals and students listening to the show, so I love the fact that we have a dialogue in our community. So on today's episode, we're going to be speaking about how to treat someone with a disability. And I want to mention episode 43 that was recently from July with Genia Stephen. And on that episode, we talked about creating a vision for your child's life. When someone has a disability, you are forced to make certain decisions that in another situation with a child who didn't have those disabilities, they would just go with the flow and move from grade to grade and kind of move along life without having to make big decisions. Whereas the journey with a child who's disabled is very different. So I'm excited to introduce our guest today. Chaya is a parenting coach and also does marriage counseling, and she's going to share her story and her perspective. So welcome to the show.
Hello. Hi.
Thank you for coming on. So Chaya, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So first, I'd like to start with that I'm a mother of 7, and I have a 20-year-old triplets that were born when I was 24. Then I have a 17-year-old, and I have an 11-year-old, and I have twins that just turned 5. So as a parent, I have experience with teens, now young adults, and toddlers, and multiple. So I like to share a lot of my own personal experience with my parents, with classes, from my own parent and child experiences. And that's what I learn a lot from them, and I teach from them.
Incredible. Wait, so when you became a mother, you had 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, right away. Right away, I started off with 3. I never knew what it was like to just have, one child, when both parents are like taking care of one child and all around that one child, and, 2 parents to do the diaper and the feeding and everything. And me and my husband were always juggling between us. Someone had to feed, someone had to do the diapers. And thank God it's been a wonderful journey. And at the beginning, I started off with very, very confident in myself and how I wanted to raise my triplets. I started with the triplets, so I had very confident ideas of how I wanted to raise them, and it actually went very, very well as when they were babies, and obviously started to become more complicated for me as they got older and entered the school system. So I'll address that, I think, a little bit later. I would also like to add that I was diagnosed as deaf when I was 2.5, almost 3 years old. I was diagnosed as deaf, and the doctor who diagnosed me told my parents that I would never learn how to speak and listen. That's what they told my parents. This was in Toronto, Canada. And my parents, they told my parents, you have to send your daughter to the school for deaf, and she's going to have to learn signing, and that's it. You don't have another choice. Now, thank God for my parents and their own, sense, I don't know, their own belief in themselves, belief in their child. First of all, they could not believe it. I was already almost 3 years old. And to them, they saw a child that was very, very functional. They say that I was a pretty good girl. I was pretty functional. I was a happy child, and I did what I was supposed to do. And they were pretty amazed at how much I was able to do without hearing. So they said, if this is how much she's capable of without hearing, we're not going to send her away to a deaf school. We think that she could do way more. We just have to help her with her hearing. Now, back then, and I saw that you mentioned it in one of your episodes, parents, how do they get their information? It wasn't through the internet where you find tons of options. No, back then you spoke to people, you looked it up, like you said in the phone book.
Yeah.
And you didn't get that much variety of information. And it happened to be that they met, not happened to me. I believe that everything is with a purpose. They met someone in the doctor's office that was Orthodox, and they just pointed each other out, and they introduced themselves. And the other couple told my parents, our daughter is also diagnosed deaf, and we are teaching her to speak and listen through auditory verbal, which was in Toronto. And they right away gave my parents a number. So this is basically all the information my parents had. What the doctor said and what these parents said. No Google, no internet. And that's what they did. And they went and they got this number, and they were told that we can teach your daughter how to speak and listen. We just have to give her the right technology and give her the right hearing aids and, adjust them properly according to her hearing. And they teach her from the basics. I'm going to start from the basics. And I was close to 3 when I got my first pair of hearing aids. And my parents took me to auditory verbal sessions once a week. And my mother, I have to say, worked with me all the time at home, like all the time, to catch me up on all the sounds, on the listening. And I have memories, not from when I was 3, but I have memories of her putting words all over the house and having me, read the word or say the word. I don't think I could read yet, but say the word, and just like a reminder to keep saying the word. Or she wouldn't stop talking to me. She would talk to me when she was cooking. She would talk to me when she was cutting an apple. She just didn't stop talking so that I would just hear as much as possible. And basically,
I think it's very important to point out that the tenets, the principles of the auditory verbal therapy method are very much about more and more talking, more and more input, so that the child hears and is constantly cued to pay attention to sounds around them and to words. And also that the parents really, really play a crucial role. Sometimes people say, oh, they do ADT at school, but then maybe the parents are not completely on board or can't be involved. So, there's a lot of factors about when someone chooses that route, how it goes. So that's amazing. And do you mind me asking, you don't have to answer, edit this out if you don't like, but I'm just wondering, around what decade this was.
Okay. So I was born in 1976. So I would say this was 80s. No problem. I can't believe I'm at that age that you have to be, embarrassed to ask me. I don't feel so old yet. But yes.
I think it puts it into context because so many people, are young parents, and this is happening now, and they are inundated with Facebook groups and with podcasts.
No, and also, listen, I see it also with parents, not having to do with disability, just general parents today part of the problem is that they're overwhelmed with the amount of information, like how to raise a child in general and how to be a parent. There are so many different methods out there that it's very, very confusing and overwhelming. So I'm sure also when it comes to a disability, it's the same issue where you just don't know what path to choose. And that's why I say I'm so proud of my parents that they were so, obviously it was easier, but on the other hand, they did have a doctor who told them something else. And they were just so confident in themselves and confident in me. And believe me, if you would meet my mother, you would see what I'm talking about. Like I think, if it wasn't for her and her strong will, I wouldn't be where I am today. I totally give her. I always say my mother always corrects me and said, it's me and your father. But, my mother was with me most of the time. My father was working. I have nothing against my father. He is a great father. But I do remember my mother playing the main role. And it was that confidence that she had. And she had it from the day that she decided. She didn't have it from the beginning. But when she made a decision, she had that confidence. And I think it's important for parents in general. That's what I teach in my classes, is to have confidence in yourself and whatever you choose. You're the parent, you decide if you choose this way or that way. But when you decide, be confident in your decision because you're the parent. You get to decide, your children. Yeah. So I
really part of that, when you're saying that she decided and she was committed, to that journey, that means probably that you had your hearing aids in all day long.
Definitely.
You made every appointment, all of those kind of if you're on it, you're 100%.
Exactly. And that was my mother 100%. So I really, really admire her till today. Like I have the shivers when I think about it. I admire her till today when I think about it. And it's true because when my triplets were born, people gave me advice. And you know what? I didn't have, there wasn't Facebook yet. We weren't as connected. But I had people commenting me, telling me, you need to do this, you need to, different advice, different opinions. The teacher in the kindergarten telling me what she thought. And Automatically they see triplets. Oh, what week were they born? Oh, that's why he's behaving that way. That, like, it was right away. And I didn't have that confidence. And that's when it started to be hard for me, because that's when I started hearing opinions, and then it started to be harder for me. And then I lost my confidence. I'm very aware of it. So that's why I admire my mother so much, because I know how hard it can be when you're out there, you know. So, so going back to that, like you said, they always expose you to sound and hearing, because if you pay attention, people tend to, around deaf or hearing impaired children, to talk less, because they think, oh, well, she can't hear, so what's the point, you know? Or you don't realize they don't do it on purpose. They're not doing it. I'm not talking about parents and teachers, but I'm talking in general. If that's how people react, because they just, you know, they automatically react that way, just thinking that it's probably pointless to talk too much. They're not going to hear. And my mother always says the opposite: talk as much as possible. So, and then she says, when I started talking, I didn't stop talking. You know, that was the problem.
When I worked at a school for the deaf, you know, I would hear all sorts of people asking questions. Oh, what's that like? And one person would say, it must be so quiet in the lunchroom. And I said, no, you have 200 children in a lunchroom. It's noisy.
Right.
Right. There's kind of this misconception that or like all sorts of myths and discrimination, stereotypes that go on. Right. So that's a big part of what we do on this show, is try to bring people's stories and humanize this. Lots of times for parents who are holding a 2-week-old with news and are like, what just happened? What does our life look like? What are our expectations for this child?
Right.
So,
right. So that's what I talk about a lot in my class, is expectation. That's the word. What are our expectations for the child? And I know that when my mother decided that and her goal, like you spoke about in your other podcast, was what's your goal for your children. I think it's a big part of it. And her goal was very clear to her. Like, it came clear to her that she wants to raise a child that's going to become independent adult that will be able to live her own life independently and get married, have children, have a job, have a career. And that was her. I know that's what she saw. That was her vision, and that's what she was aiming for. And that's why she didn't give up. And that's why she worked so hard with me. And by the way, I have a younger brother that was also born with a hearing loss. So once he was born, she was already on board. She already knew what to do, and she got started from day one. He had a little more hearing than me, but it was still crucial. And she worked with him. And so from day one, they also mainstreamed me into the regular school system. And I don't remember much of it, but I do remember going into first grade. And she sent me to the regular Hebrew day school in the regular class. And my mother always said, I want her to have friends and socialize with kids her age in our community. That was important to my mother. My mother said, I don't really care about her grades. I care about her social life. And before that, in order to get me into that school, she said she did not leave the principal's office until they would accept me. Like, that's how confident she was in herself. That's why I'm saying, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be the way I am now, because she was just so confident. She knew what she wanted, and she was determined to get it. And they accepted me as they didn't have a choice. And basically, I remember going to the school in grade 1, first grade. And I know today, as a mother, parents are always so nervous about sending their kids to first grade today. Is he ready? Is he ready emotionally? Is he ready, does he know his letters? Does he know his numbers? How much does he know? Is he ready? And I remember being that nervous mother as well. And my mother wasn't nervous about that. And I remember I was behind. I was definitely behind. I only started to listen when I was 3, like the basics. So I was behind. And I remember sitting in class and the teacher would say, go to page 10 or whatever, 12. I didn't know where the page was. I didn't know. I remember that. But I do remember just checking my friend next to me or whoever was sitting next to me, looking where she went, and I followed. And I copied her. And that sticks out in my mind till today, because I'm very good at that. I'm very good at looking around, checking for cues, and that's what I do. And then I learn from that, and I learn a lot from that. And from that, I want to explain a very important belief that I have, that children and adults that with disabilities figure it out. They really do have the capability of figuring it out, a lot of times more than the professionals, because they're living with the disability. So they need to figure it out. You're not living in my body, so I know what I need in order to figure out what page to go to. And that's how I did it. That's how I did it in school until slowly then my mother would come with me and introduce me to the teacher and tell the teacher she needs to sit in the front row and give her all the instruction. And then I remember fourth grade, I told my mother, please don't come with me anymore. I want to go by myself. And I recently said this to my mother. I said to her, do you remember? She said, and I said, how did that make you feel when I said that to her? She said, it was actually very hard for her. She was like, what? You want to go by yourself? Like, even though it was in her goal and her vision, but she wasn't ready, to set, she wasn't ready yet,
Yeah.
But I remember myself as a child, I didn't like it when she came and introduced me and showed the teacher. And I didn't like being signaled out. I didn't like being treated differently. I'd like to be treated like everyone else. And till today, even in other aspects in my life, I'm a mother of triplets. I don't want special attention. I want to be treated like everyone else. I don't want to be signaled out. And that's the same as I was as a kid. It's like I lived with that and I always aimed to be like everyone else and pushed myself. I pushed myself a lot to do that. And this is a big part of me and what I teach. That's why it's important to me to share my personal story and understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, the ability of children to compensate and to find what they need and the answers from other ways, right? But isn't that also, something that many of us struggle with and worry about for our patients, for our children, that can be really taxing and that there's so much listening fatigue and that it takes so much more energy to do those things where, in another context, maybe you could have had more support and it would have been easier to find a page because that would have been, more accessible to you in a way that you didn't have to fight for it. What are your thoughts on that?
I didn't feel like I had to fight for it. I just felt like I was just figuring out a way. And my beliefs are that I don't believe that life is supposed to be easy. Listen, even people not everyone has a disability, but everybody does have something they deal with or some sort of challenge. It might not be a visible disability that we see or we're aware of. People have challenges or they come from a home that's difficult and difficult situation, or who knows, everybody deals with different challenges. And that's life. Life comes with surprises, life comes with ups and downs. And children that are put into the real life figure it out a way and they become stronger and they learn from these challenges. And that's what built me. That's what built me to who I am today, was to learn and figure out different situations. Even today, I'll tell you a scary story. Also, before smartphones, very quick, scary story, but turned out fine, was that we lived in Israel and I traveled. I'm trying to remember. No, I came back from Canada to Israel after summer vacation. And I went in the wrong line to boarding. I went by myself. I must have been 16. And I was waiting in the wrong boarding line to get onto the plane. And so I was in the wrong boarding line. So when I gave them my ticket, they're like, oh, you're in the wrong place. There's your plane. It just took off. I missed my plane. So they sent me to another flight. They were really sweet. They sent me to another flight. I went on a different flight and I ended up having a stopover somewhere where I wasn't supposed to have a stopover. And I ended up needing to call my mother. And I pick up the phone and I cannot hear a thing on the phone. Now, this is before the smartphone. This is before WhatsApp and SMS, which makes life so much easier. And I picked up the phone. I couldn't talk to my mother. I ended up asking a stranger to talk to my mother. I'm just giving that example that I asked a stranger to help me out. Like, I figured out a way. Obviously, it wasn't something that I would have liked to happen. But the fact that I knew what to do and I knew how to cope with the situation comes from the place of always having to try to figure out and cope with the situation. And you never know when a challenging situation is going to come up. And I find even children that are healthy and well, we want them to learn and know how to deal with challenges that come along the way. And parents are always asking me, but what's my role as a parent? They want to jump in and help. They want to give the kids more. They want to. But then the children are becoming more and more dependent on us and not independent. And I want to raise independent children, starting from cooking their own food in the kitchen. Oh, but the fire is hot, it's dangerous. Okay, you're the mother, you'll decide from what age. Are you going to let them from the age of 10 or are you going to wait till they're 15? You decide, you're the parent. But really, also believing and understanding that children are capable of so much more what you see and then what we know. We're more afraid, but really they really are capable of so much more, but they feed off of our fears.
That's so true. Okay. And then I wanted to ask you about that day that you said, don't come with me anymore.
Right.
Did you do the self-advocacy of I need to sit in the front and all of that? Or did you not want you didn't want to speak about it or address it? Like how did it go then?
So I did ask for the front seat because I knew that I needed it. I knew that I needed to sit there, and in order to hear, I did need that. So I wasn't in denial that I needed it, but I like being able to take care of myself.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I just wanted to get that because, it's one thing to say, don't come with me and then go sit in the back and isolate. But you were ready to say, don't come with me. I got it for myself.
And you know what? This was a class that the kids knew me and I knew them.
Yeah.
And I think being in a regular society, that's what happened. They learned me and I learned them.
Yeah.
Now, when I made Aliyah and I moved to Israel in grade 9, 14 years old, another challenge. And I went up. I also told my mom, I don't need your help. I'm 14, right? I'm a big girl. So I went to a Hebrew day school. So my Hebrew was the level was very, very minor, limited. But I knew how to read and write, but like not the level, nowhere near the level that I needed. Mm-hmm. But I knew enough to ask for the front seat. And the girls looked at me and said, no, we're sitting. And they wouldn't give me the front seat. And I could not believe it. I was in shock, like that they wouldn't give me the front seat. So I was so upset that I had to go up to the teacher and ask her. And I really, really was disappointed that I had to do that I couldn't just do it on my own without the teacher's help. But I did that. Like I did do that. First of all, the new language and acoustics of those classrooms were horrible. But I did advocate for myself and push myself in the front. And I was determined to learn the language, slowly, the class learned me and I learned them. And slowly I made friends and slowly I overcame the challenges and I graduated high school properly. And I won't say that I didn't get help. I did get help. I'm not against getting help, but I feel that the help came from me asking for the help. When the responsibility is in you, it's not my parents. First of all, my parents had no idea what was going on in school. Also, their Hebrew wasn't great. And they were just busy trying to settle in the country, finding jobs, paying the bills, learning the language. So they were not involved. And I think it's very good that they were not involved because I looked out for myself. And I really believe that in general with parents and children. I have children of my own. When it's their responsibility, then they ask for the help. And I always tell them, you want help, I'm here to give it to you, of course. But it needs to come from them if they want it. Then they use it to the maximum.
Yes, I'm listening.
Okay.
My 6-year-old is going to first grade in the fall, God willing. Hopefully that school will be open. Let's see.
I know, right? That's another challenge that we're dealing with today.
Yeah.
But just remember, just to address that, your child going to school, and I'm going back to that natural instinct of children, they want to learn. It's interesting because I'm reading actually a really good book now. It calls The Giver of Stars. Anyway, it's very cool because it talks about it in 1930, and these 4 women are giving, there's no library, and they make it their mission to go around giving out books to families like all over scattered around town, and they don't have money, and this is what they do. It's a traveling library.
Wow.
And it describes how, this is like before, like we don't realize how good we have it today. And it describes how these children run up, they go with horses from town to town. Like they spend days traveling to give these books to these families. And the children come running out of the house for the books. And they can't wait to see the books. And it just reminds you of the children's natural desire to learn. And we forget, they felt so privileged to have a book, so privileged to be able to learn. And I want to go back to that inner desire of our children. I believe that every child has that. It reminds me of when my older children were sitting and doing homework, and my little ones said, oh, I want homework too. I want homework too. Like, why do they want homework? Because they want to learn. They also want to learn.
Yes.
So to remember that. It's like learning to read is opening up a whole new world for them. It's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh my gosh. I love it. I feel very connected to your message.
yeah, this is what I teach in my workshops and my classes. I try to pass this on to parents. And I find that today lots of parents are struggling because many children tend to be struggling as well. And then when we see our children struggle, of course, it makes us nervous, it makes us worried, it makes us scared, and then it makes us want to do more for them. And my mother says to me, you think I sent her to school? And she said that when we made Aliyah in Israel, I remember going for my hearing aid adjustment and it wasn't good. I was 14, so I was aware. And I was very, very used to the very professional hearing adjustment in Toronto. And I very attached to them and I liked the way they do it. It was very hard for me to come to Israel and have somebody else touch my hearing aids.
Yeah.
And they did not do a good job. Now, again, this is back in 1990. And I remember going to school. Everything was so loud, like they did it too loud, like put a cup on the table and my head would jump. It was just horrible. But my mother says, I sent her to school. I made her. She told me she can't hear. She told me that it's not comfortable. I sent her to school anyway. And she said, you think I didn't feel bad? Of course I felt bad. But I knew that she had to go to school. And I knew she shouldn't miss a day of school. And that was my mother. Like, she sent us to school. And the only time we stayed home was maybe if we had fever. Only if you had fever and you could prove that you're sick. Otherwise, there was no excuse. So the same thing with the hearing. So the point is that she's sending me out there to figure it out, to make the best of it. And like I was going back to saying that our kids struggling, we tend to jump in and try to do everything for them. It's a dynamic that you get pulled into, and it's hard to get yourself out of it. So that's what I do in my workshop. I help parents get themselves out of this dynamic and help invite your children to come and to pursue their potentials.
Yeah. I mean, I think exactly the word, when you started talking about struggle, that's exactly the underlying belief that so many parents have, is that they don't want their child to struggle or suffer, which of course we don't want that for anyone, but like you come back to the realism and say, well, this is what we have. So what are we going to do about it now?
Instead of looking at it as a struggle or a hardship, I can look at it as a challenge. Another challenge that we're going to overcome. Another challenge that we're going to learn from and grow from. It just changes your perspective and how you look at that.
It's funny. Many times in these conversations, we use the metaphor of exercise, right? You have to work out the muscles so that they get strong. And if you don't, then they get weak. Like the same with the hearing. We want to work out the brain. Exactly. Like we use that all the time. But recently, I actually started exercising in a more regimented way. And I was like, oh, I get it.
Right. And you really have to work at it, right?
And it's really hard.
Exactly. Totally. It's a great example. And it's a great example.
Audiology metaphors, I'm applying them to my exercise. Yes.
But it's a great example. But it's the same thing I would say, life is like a gym. We go to the gym to work on those muscles and to strengthen them. I remember my son, who's now 20, and he, first of all, as a teenager, I don't know, he was, sorry to say this, hope he doesn't, get offended, but he was pretty lazy. Okay, really, really lazy and did not move. Okay, and when he started joining the gym, I have to say I was shocked. Like, I never believed it would ever happen. That's just another example of you never know where your kids are going to end up. Like, it's amazing. It's beautiful to see. So anyways, he started joining the gym after never doing anything. I mean, he failed flunked sports in school. Okay, never did any type of sport, and he decided he wanted to join the gym. And I said, great. And it had nothing to do with me. I did pay for the membership. And other than that, oh my God, he put himself on such a strict schedule and on a diet. And I mean, I look at him today and I'm still shocked. And this is already unbelievable. But he worked hard and it was hard. Like, he would be there for a month and he still didn't see a change. And it didn't stop him. He just knew it takes time. You don't stop after a month. It takes time and then you have to upkeep it. So it's work. It's work in the process. And the same thing is life. Life, you go into life and it's all a gym. And the children learn from life. They learn from school situations. They learn from family situations. They learn from all these situations. And if we keep jumping in and helping them, they're not going to learn how to do it on their own. To be independent and to be confident is to be able to solve problems on your own. And it's hard for parents to see their kids struggle. But I think don't look at it as a struggle. Look at something as a learning experience. They're going to learn from this and they're going to grow from this. It's the same at the gym, like you said.
But okay, I just do have to take with you,
Yes.
The other side of this, which is, this works for like up until a point, because you're also not going to take a child and throw them in a pool. And when
you know what? Someone just told me, it's funny that you say that, but someone just told me there is a method that does that. So I think, I'm trying to think which mother told me this. She said that her swimming teacher said not to put on those floaties on the arms, because then they're depending on the floaties and they're not learning how to swim. So there are methods that do that, by the way.
Okay, but also you won't throw them in without an adult nearby. There's still going to be some structure that helps them, that holds them. It isn't going to be, you know what? There's the ocean. Have at it. So, of course, there's still place and much value for services and for all the rehabilitation that we do for anyone with any kind of disability. And that's the thing about hearing loss, where it overlaps with disability in a lot of ways. And then it's also outside of in other ways, and it's important to acknowledge that. We have a lot of patients, a lot of listeners where the deafness or hearing loss is maybe the sixth or seventh problem, or maybe you won't say problem, right? Something they're dealing with medically, intellectual disabilities, and other things that are really, at play. So as much as I appreciate and really respect this approach, we just need to also say it's not for every child that they're going to, everything is like a challenge for them that we can overcome. Sometimes there are things that we're going to have to give services for.
Okay, but I just would like to say, even my parents got, I went to speech therapy, once a week for many years. I did benefit from those services.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, though, and especially with any kind of disability, the truth is we really, really don't know what a person is capable of doing, including your children. So even if you are going to this, to get help and to these services, but don't limit. You don't know what they are capable of doing. Like, don't decide for your child where he can reach and what his limits are. And you do not know. We're not God. We do not know what our children's limits are. Even based on experience, every child is different, and some children will push further and reach. And it's very, very important to go in it open-minded and just keep the doors open, knowing that he is capable of so much more than what he is showing you. Whether or not you're getting services or not, just know that he is capable of so much more, and he naturally wants to. And it's a natural desire to want to try as much as possible to join the society, just like a healthy child does when he starts to walk and crawl and talk.
Like you said before, that it's our fear that we are not capable. In the same exact line, parents are more capable than they know for themselves.
That, of course.
Yeah.
So and also, you're living with this disability, they will need to figure out, and sometimes just letting go of the rope a little bit, just to, let them explore, let them try. Like, I once saw a video of someone with CP, and I don't remember his name. Sorry, I don't remember. But he explained that when he was getting ready for school one day, and his mother just, he was in his room doing it by himself, and she would not come to help him. And it took him a long time to get his socks on, and a long time to get and he did it. She just waited and waited and waited. So she was able to do that, to give him the time, all the time he needed to get dressed, to do that. But like you said, you have that fear and you don't want them to struggle. And the other hand is knowing that if they do succeed in doing it, it's an amazing accomplishment for them. So being able to, take a step aside, it's hard. Telling a parent to take a step aside is hard. That's sometimes the hardest thing is, you want to jump and help, but sometimes the best thing is not to.
Wow. You're absolutely right. I hope that many of the listeners get some inspiration and, get a little confidence for themselves in their abilities and the opportunities for their children.
Right, definitely.
You've already given us so much advice, but if there's like one message you want the takeaway to end us off, what would you say?
I would say there's nothing wrong with having high expectations. Okay. Don't put a stamp on your child. Even with all the diagnoses and all the things that are written about him, there's still so much more beyond. We ourselves do not pursue our potential. So our children definitely don't can reach much more than what you see. Like that's my main line is that what you see is not all there is. There's so much more. So don't put a stamp on him and don't limit your expectations. Why not raise the expectations? You know, I have a teacher that taught my children in kindergarten, nursery school, when they're 3. She taught them the body parts, like eyes, nose, and mouth. And then she said, you know what? She told me, she said, I also threw in there the organs, and I taught them the organs, the heart. I couldn't believe my 3-year-old twins came home knowing their lungs, their heart. It was unbelievable. She said, yeah, I push up a higher level. I teach it. They get it, they don't go, but I always give them a little higher. You know, always aim for a little higher and don't be afraid to aim for higher. And that's okay. And it's up to them. If they want to, they'll take it. If they don't, they won't.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Have you looked into cochlear implant surgery? Is that
so we forgot to touch that. I wanted to talk about that as well. I have 2 cochlear implants. I did them as an adult.
When did you do that?
I totally it came into my head to talk about it. And then, we got distracted. Okay, this is what I thought about it when we were talking about the phone and we had to get the phone. Anyway, thank God I'm able to use a phone. Okay. And generally I'm able to use a phone. And when the triplets were, I don't remember how old, but I had the baby who was 1.5 years. He was 11 months. Okay. First he was 11 months and I couldn't hear. Like my hearing went down drastically. My good ear became really bad. So I was like, I could not hear on the phone at all. I could not make a single phone call, which was really hard for me because, like I said to you, I like to be independent. I like to take care of myself, and I lost that. And there was no WhatsApp and SMSs then, so that was really hard. I remember calling my mother saying, "I need your help to make phone calls," and I really didn't like that. That's one thing. I couldn't. Now, my parents wanted me to do the cochlear implant when I was in high school. I didn't want to do it because Miss Independent, wanted to be like everyone else, doesn't want to do surgery. I felt like I was doing so well. I don't need it. Anyway, so with the triplets and then another one, that was good when you're not responsible for other people and you're only responsible for yourself. Mm-hmm. When you have children and, for example, you can't hear them unless they're in the room with you. So if I'm washing dishes, I couldn't hear. This is with the hearing aid, and this is before I lost more hearing. I couldn't hear from one room to the next. They're playing in one room. I'm in one room. I don't hear them. I'm washing the dishes. I don't hear them. Like I did not hear them. I walk home. If I'm gone with them, I couldn't hear what they were telling me. It's like I told them, you have to wait till we get home and then you'll tell me. And we'll sit down and then you tell me. Like all these situations that I just couldn't hear them. And I did feel a little helpless. Like I did feel like this isn't good. I don't feel I have control. I have 4 little children and I really didn't feel like I can handle the situation. So that was one. And then my hearing went down drastically. And then I said, that's it. I have to do a cochlear implant. There was no choice. And I went to do it. My baby was 15 months old. And I booked a surgery like almost right away. He was 11 when I decided. When he was 15 months old, I did the surgery. And I only did it in 1 ear to start with. Mm-hmm. It wasn't common yet to do both ears at once. Mm-hmm. So I did 1 ear and it was life-changing. Life-changing. Like I thought I was doing so well before with the hearing aid. I realized how much I was missing. And hearing the children from one room to the next. I was toilet training them. They would call me from the bathroom. I'm finished. I could hear them. I could come, And like you said that before, you mentioned like listening, it can be very tiring. And I didn't realize how much energy I put into listening. I didn't realize it. I wasn't aware of it because that's what I did. But once I did the cochlear implant, I was like, oh my God, the sound just comes to my ear. It's like, that's what I felt like. I felt like it's here. I don't have to work hard to hear it. It was unbelievable. I could not believe it. I was like, why didn't I listen to my parents and do this sooner? Lots of sound. I could walk with them to GAN and hear my kids talking to me and telling me stories and hold their hand and have a conversation. I could hear the birds. I could hear my husband chewing on his food, which I never heard before.
Do you want to hear him chewing his food?
Well, now it's amazing because your brain gets used to it. So you don't hear it anymore. Beginning, it was so loud. I was like, I can't eat. You're too loud.
Yeah.
So it was pretty amazing. It was also, I realized that I wasn't hearing people's names properly. I discovered that one of my husband's uncle's name, I thought it was Jerome. It was Jerome. We're just like I'm discovering new sounds all the time.
Wow. And then
then,
how soon did you do the second one?
right, but the second one I did a few years later. I don't remember the exact amount of years in between that, but it was quite a few years later. And now, of course, I say I don't know how I did just with one. I mean, it was two. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's life changing, completely life changing. I don't think I could do Zoom if I didn't have the cochlear implant. And
Yeah.
I have to say that in the beginning of the corona, already a while ago, people said to me, why don't you try doing Zoom so you can reach people out of Israel, you know? And I was too scared to. I didn't think I could do it because of the hearing. And now corona just threw it at my face that you don't have a choice. I had 3 groups going at the same time. I didn't want to cancel them. I had to move them to Zoom, and I just did it. It just, Hashem threw us this challenge, and I did it, and I overcame it, and I did it. And I'm very proud of myself that I was able to. I actually enjoy it. I see everybody's face.
Yeah. Do you have the audio streaming to your cochlear implants? Like that it goes direct, like the phone?
No, I don't have that. I have only for one ear. I have it. The other one, it doesn't come with it. Like it's not an advanced enough version, so I didn't have it. So I only have it with one ear, and I use it to talk on the phone, and I use it to watch or listen to music. That's a new one for me. I just bought it like a few months ago. So it's huge. I get to listen to music while I'm cooking, while I'm, exercising. It's very good.
Thank you so much for sharing your message with us today. I'm going to link in the show notes your Facebook page if anybody would like to reach out to you. And again, thank you for coming and sharing your message with all of us.
My pleasure. It was great to meet you.
Thank you, all the listeners of the All About Audiology podcast. You can find full transcripts of every episode at allaboutaudiology.com. Come and join us on Instagram, on Facebook. Thank you so much for being a listener. I'm Dr. Lilach Saperstein, and this is the All About Audiology podcast.